Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have an episode I am going to title the Inri Kenneth Heuermann, uncle of alleged Gilgo Beach serial killer Rex Heuermann. So this is Rex Heuermann has not been tried, obviously. So these are allegations, but there's a lot of information in the court documents. There was I think, a superseding complaint, June 6th, 2024, 2 additional victims of Rex Heuermann. But when I was talking to John Ray and his legal assistant, Lena, Ajit, I was shocked to hear that his uncle, Rex Heuermann's uncle, so that would be his grandfather, one of his grandfather's sons, or his dad's brother. Rex Heuermann's father died when he was 11. So his father passed away, but his father's brother was in upstate New York, and there was a lawsuit based upon this kind of New York State Child Victims Act, right? So if anything, statute of limitations had told you could sue people, and there was a lawsuit. So there was an anonymous woman who sued Rex Heuermann's uncle, and the lawsuit was really remarkable and has remarkable information. And I think it's worth kind of going into and discussing and taking a look at it because it is unique, and it also goes into satanic ritual abuse. And this is a very dark subject matter. So please be aware that this is really incredible stuff. But I think that it's very telling, and I'm going to show a website as well. So there'll be a lot of information that I will impart. But the court seems to have been settled out of court, I think, in 2023. So fairly, recent as far as time goes. This is the second amended complaint in the civil action, right? So it's not a criminal action, civil action where these lawyers took it in and they sued Kenneth Heuermann. You can see his name in this complaint if you're watching this on Rockfin or on X or Twitter. But you see his name. They also sued the Upstate New York Synod, Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, and St. Michael's Evangelical Lutheran Church. I think some of these defendants were dropped eventually, but I do believe that this was settled in 2023. So I should send an email to the lawyers and see what happened. But the fact patterns are really something else. And there's a really good posting with a lot of pictures, actually, so you can kind of see the names of this. But there's a really good posting on Murder Inc., so I'll also go into that, and also some of the experts in this case, this civil case against Kenneth C. Heuermann or Heuermann. The experts are incredible. It'll blow your mind. It's really something else. So I'm going to read through this, maybe not all of it, not all of the causes of action, but be forewarned, this is very dark material. The darkest, really. Pedophilia, ritual sexual abuse, satanic sexual abuse. And there's incredible amounts of information. Kenneth Heuermann, I believe, has passed away, but he was deposed like 3 times, or at least once. I think the plaintiff was deposed 3 times. So there's a lot of information, at least claims, right? So findings, but it never went to court. There was a jury trial set date, but that seems to have been settled. I'll have to double check on that. So this is plaintiff was anonymous. She went by RW, but she says here, RW at all times here and mentioned resided in Onondaga County, and the amount claimed here exceeds other course of competent jurisdiction. The complaint is brought pursuant to the New York State Child Victim Act, which extends the statute of limitations for prosecuting child sexual abuse crimes and filing civil lawsuits for damages against individuals, public institutions, and private institutions related to child sexual abuse. This act also creates a 1-year revival period for previously time-barred civil actions which alleged conduct representing the commission of certain sexual offenses committed against a child less than 18 years of age. And then the defendants are listed. RW is informed and believes that grounds alleges that defendants Upstate New York Synod hereafter UNYS, and Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, and St. Michael's Evangelical Lutheran Church, or Church, so they kind of made acronyms, ELCIA. At all times herein mentioned were corporations of other forms of business organizations authorized to do business and doing business in the county of Onondaga, the state of New York. RW is informed and believes on the ground alleges that defendants Kenneth Heuermann, and at all times relevant to this action, was pastor and managing agent of defendant St. Michael's Evangelical Lutheran Church. And it's basically the scope of employment. But here are the factual allegations applicable to all claims. In or around the period of 1961 through 1968, plaintiff RW was an emotionally vulnerable minor with material, emotional needs and problems. During that period, Heuermann was a pastor at St. Michael's Evangelical Lutheran Church in Camillus, New York, and agreed to accept responsibility for teaching and guiding RW into and through adolescence in accordance with biblical principles, including but not limited to Matthew chapter 8, verse 6, which states, "If anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea." During the period of their relationship, Heuermann, along with the assistance and cooperation of other defendants, breached his duty of care to the plaintiff RW and conducted himself in an unprofessional and negligent manner with said plaintiff. At all times material to this action, plaintiff RW reposed trust and confidence in defendants Heuermann, UNYS, ELCIA, and Church. During the 1960s, Heuermann was a pastor and or staff at Church, for which RW was a regular member. During that same period, UNIS, LCIA, and Church knew or should have known that Heuermann routinely had juveniles from the church and elsewhere in their care and custody, and that UNYS, ELCIA, and Church knew or should have known that Heuermann routinely had juveniles alone in the parsonage, church office, and at other church-related events and places, undress them, take pornographic pictures of them, be subject to nudity, participate in illegal sexual misconduct between Heuermann and the juveniles, including fondling, choking, and binding, masturbation, rape, sodomy, ritualistic sex acts, physical and psychological torture, pornographic photography, and threats of death and harm. So you see this kind of similarity to the LISK case and the so-called allegations against Rex Heuermann, who was taunting victims, like he would call them on the phone and use phones, like at least that's the allegation, right? So you see that in other snuff films, allegations, like it's super dark. All of the alleged acts and omissions are in the nature of continuing torts. Torts is like synonymous with harms, a French word. At all times during these acts being perpetrated upon RW, Heuermann was acting in the scope of his employment and or official capacities, and on behalf of the UNYS, ELCIA, and Church, therefore making them liable for these actions through the theory of respondeat superior. Further, some of the acts constitute conduct prescribed but not limited to the New York Penal Code, sections 121, 130, and 260, right? This is a civil action, not a criminal one. During that same period, they should have known that Heuermann routinely separated numerous juveniles from other children and or parents and raped them and took pornographic photographs of them, touched and fondled their genitals, and performed ritualistic torture upon the children by tying them up and raping and torturing them in the sanctuary and other sacred places in the church. Defendants have enacted a policy of ratification, endorsement, and authorization of said abuse through their disregard for the welfare of children in their care. During that same period, defendants, I'm just abbreviating this so I don't just go through the acronyms all the time. Defendants routinely took juveniles on private trips, frequently without any additional adult supervision, and some of those juveniles were subjected to illegal sexual misconduct by Heuermann, including, but not limited to, rape, sodomy, torture, fondling, masturbation, threats, and being photographed while naked. Heuermann is presently discharged of his services for the defendants herein and resides in Onondaga County, New York. Neither defendants, any of their agents, or employers undertook any background investigation of Heuermann before authorizing and approving Heuermann to become pastors and or work with children. Defendants instructed anyone relevant regarding the known and documented risks of pedophiles becoming pastors or harming children. Defendants instructed anyone relevant regarding screening, selection, background checks to prevent the known and documented risks of pedophiles becoming pastors or harming children. During the 1960s, defendants knew or should have known that pedophiles would be attracted to positions within the church, such as those occupied by Heuermann, and consequently had a duty to test, screen, and investigate the background of applications for the positions of pastors and staff. Defendants did not investigate claims of sexual abuse by Heuermann when they were notified of the allegations and did not submit Heuermann's names to be included on the ineligible pastors and or volunteers employees list or report incidents of abuse to the proper law enforcement authorities, despite being notified multiple times throughout the past several decades, and despite mandatory reporting requirements which allowed other children to be at risk of similar acts by the defendants. At all times, defendants were the agents, representatives, employees of each and every other defendant. So that's it. So the first cause of action, false imprisonment. Defendant Heuermann, as part of his sexual abuse and without the consent of plaintiff on multiple occasions, bound and gagged R.W., who was forced into and left alone to suffer in confined spaces within the church and or parsonage. As a result of being aware of being forced into confinement by the defendant, R.W. has sustained serious and permanent injuries too, including but not limited to health, strength, activity, severe mental anguish, and severe emotional distress, including but not limited to anxiety, sleep disturbance, eating disturbance, stomach upset, depression, withdrawal, diminished self-esteem, post-traumatic stress disorder, and dissociation, disruption of social functioning, including but not limited to difficulties with peers, difficulties with the opposite sex, inability to enjoy marriage, inability to enjoy children, distrust of authority figures, and was and will be caused to suffer such injuries indefinitely into the future, all resulting in general damages. As a further legal result of said wrongful acts, R.W. was required to and did employ physicians and medical providers to examine, treat, and provide care, and incurred expenses, therefore, and will be required to incur additional expenses in the future, the exact amount of which is unknown at this time. The aforementioned wrongful acts of Heuermann were willful, malicious, and intentional, and were committed with full knowledge that they constituted a crime and that they would cause permanent and devastating physical and mental harm to R.W., and is therefore entitled to an award of punitive damages. Second cause of action, assault and battery, sexual molestation, abuse of a minor, sexual battery. On multiple occasions during the period of 1961 to 1968 in Onondaga County, Heuermann intentionally raped, sodomized, tortured, threatened death and harm, photographed naked, sexually touched, molested, choked, performed ritualistic sex acts, bound and committed lewd and lascivious acts upon R.W., who at all times was a minor, between the ages of 8 and 15 years of age, in violation of the New York Penal Code. Said rape, sodomy, torture, ritualistic sex acts, nude photographing, molestation, choking and binding, and lewd and lascivious acts were committed against R.W.'s will and without consent, and R.W. did not comprehend or understand what Heuermann was doing or the harm it would cause. On such occasions, R.W. was an active member of the UNYS-ELCIA and church, and was under the care and custody and control of Heuermann, who was an agent of defendants. And then they list all of her kind of long list of emotional, mental problems. Let's see. Intentional and third cause of action, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Heuermann acted intentionally, maliciously, recklessly for the purpose of causing R.W. humiliation, mental anguish, and severe emotional and physical distress. In these acts, Heuermann was abused his position as pastor and staff and or volunteer, which gave him actual authority over R.W. The fourth cause of action is negligence, kind of the same type of thing. Breach of fiduciary duty, general negligence. So these are all the kind of causes of actions. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, again, same kind of causes. So that's the second amended complaint from 2022. But this gets interesting. This is some of the background of this case from Murder Inc. So I'll show this for people who are watching this and read through it. But the pictures are something else. So this is a picture of this guy, Kenneth Heuermann. And they kind of run big, the Heuermann family or whatever. They're tall. Like you'll see these in pictures. So this is him. It's the Reverend Kenneth Heuermann stands in front of some of the trees slated to be cut down to widen Hinsdale Road. And this is from murderincorp.wordpress.com from January 2024. So they did a kind of in-depth article. And here is the woman who is the plaintiff. Play this. Let me see if I can get this to play. No, probably not. Let me see if I can get this to play. Let's try this. So this is it. She was the one who did the lawsuit, and I'll try to get this to go on to this. Yeah, but this is fairly recent. This is recent stuff. So listen here. It's not background noise. It's some kind of background noise from the video itself. So sorry about that. So that was outside of Camillus. I guess that is outside of Syracuse, so upstate New York. Camillus is outside of Syracuse. Sorry about the audio issues. It was from the video itself, so I apologize for that. Let's see. So let's get back. This is a good good article. So let me go back to this. So there's Kenneth Heuermann. This is the allegations. This is the victim. More pictures. So I guess this is the father here, George H. Heuermann, tall guy with J. Edgar Hoover. Let's see. Murder Inc. I'm reading from Murder Inc. Murder Inc. is exclusively reporting that Reverend Heuermann, who is from Long Island, right? So he's from Long Island, just like Rex, is Heuermann's first cousin once removed. Rex Heuermann's grandfather, William Heuermann, was brothers with Kenneth Heuermann's father, Alfred Heuermann. One of the three belts used to bind Gilgo Beach victim, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, was marked with the letters WH, and it's theorized to have belonged to Rex Heuermann's grandfather and Kenneth Heuermann's uncle, William Heuermann. RW describes a fourth man who participated in the abuse but wore a police uniform or security guard uniform was called Mr. Roberts. Reverend Kenneth Heuermann's brother, George Heuermann, was the number 2 cop in the Nassau County Police Department and attended the FBI Academy in 1965. He is seen below with number 1 G-Man Edgar J. Hoover. When Shannon Gilbert called 911 on May 1st, 2010, screaming bloody murder, she was at the house directly next door to Monsignor Alan Plotkin. A lot of this information was shared in the discussion I had with Lena and John. In the gated community at Oak Beach, Babylon, New York, Alan Plaka is also accused of drugging and raping children. Rex Heuermann and Alan Plaka were both involved with the religious organization Catholic Charities. Rex Heuermann is Catholic, just like his uncle Kenneth. Shannon Gilbert was later found dead in a march on Ocean Parkway. Over 11 bodies were found in the Long Island serial killer, or LISK, for people who don't know. That's why it got the acronym LISK. Cluster site along Ocean Parkway, including one mother and child. Many of the LISK victims were under 5 feet tall, and it's been suggested they may have been surrogate victims chosen for their small stature in the place of children. Murder Inc. also suspects that the Long Island serial killer more child murders besides the toddler found at Gilgo in the town of Babylon. Rex Heuermann is alleged to have searched the internet for images of young girls crying. A girl from California claimed Rex flew her to New York and told her over pizza that his favorite serial killers were the Hillside Stranglers, Angelo Bono and his cousin Kenneth Bianchi. Rex Heuermann's brother shows an address history in Bellingham, Washington, where Bianchi murdered 2 women in 1979. RW reported her abuse to the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Bishop Perry in January of 1991. In a photograph taken at St. Michael's on September 8, 1991, Reverend Kenneth Heuermann is seen smiling and holding a balloon while leading a parade of children. The ritual, torture, and child sex abuse Reverend Heuermann is accused of obviously raises deep and shocking questions about the psychopathological origins of the Long Island serial killer. And this website, which I'll put a link to, has excerpts from the deposition that is public. You can read the whole thing. And there were other supposed victims. It was, let's see, Mr. Rising and Mr. Robert. And this is the last event of this day was when I was 17, a senior in high school. And where did the event occur and who was involved? The last event I recalled was starting in the room off of the altar in the nave area of the church with Mr. Rising and Mr. Robert. Somehow, I don't know how I got there. I feel like I was drugged. And they had me pinned on the floor and were shaving my pubic area, and I was nude. After that was continued, I ended up on the altar and was being photographed by Mr. Rising and abused by Reverend Heuermann, sexual assault, and that was being photographed. On your letter to Bishop Herge, or Jerge, on the 4th page, you describe with the following language: another incident of sexual and physical assault occurred inside the altar railing, and I was mostly nude and had been placed on the actual marble. So, and then there's an excerpt of what I just read, which was the complaint, probably the second amended complaint. And then here's a picture of Heuermann. Kenneth Heuermann is here, I think on the far left. New officers of Lutheran ministry on campus. RW testified to first being assaulted by Reverend Kenneth Heuermann at St. Michael's on Lutheran Church when she was only 8 years old. This is from her deposition. She didn't testify. This is from the deposition. When's the first memory you have of Reverend Ken? Answer: the first rehearsal for the pageant when I was dropped off at 8, probably on a Saturday afternoon or something, to practice for the pageant. And some man with a gray suit took me through a double white doors downstairs to this room. And I recall wondering where are the mothers that are helping? Why aren't the mothers helping? But this man in a gray suit, who I later learned was Mr. Rising, I didn't go down and get some of the help to practice with. He dropped me off at this door to a dimly lit room, and then he left. Mr. Rising, or the man in the gray suit, is what I called him. And I didn't know where he was, and shut the door. I was immediately very scared, because this is when we called him Pastor Ken. And I was in this semi-dark room, basement, with him and very scared. And there were boxes of stuff, around. And then he said, we're going to get the clothes, get the gowns and stuff to dress, dress me up as Mary. And I was very, very nervous about this. I don't know if I had met him before personally, but I don't recall that. He picked out some clothes. They were different clothes to me. They were just like a gauze gown with a belt and a scarf. And he told me to take my clothes off, and he unbuttoned my jacket. I had a dress on. I was dressed up if I was going to Sunday school. They threw the dress over the table, and then, bad stuff happened. So you can read that. Let's see what else is there. RW testifies to being bound with clerical stools and repeatedly tortured by Reverend Heuermann. So he's into torture. So this is some kind of strange stuff. RW wrote Bishop Marie Jerge a letter in 2007 detailing her abuse at the church. Marie Jerge did nothing and tried to make the victim to meet Kenneth Heuermann, the same man RW just told he had been raping her as a child. So there's another letter that's in the record. They talk kind of the detail. I did my best to fight back by hitting and biting. As a result, my arms and legs were tied together. My limbs were secured on nearby furniture using clerical stools. I would hear him talking outside the room to a church sexton, Mr. Meyer, who appeared to be acting as a watch guard. Sounds very Masonic. Another incident occurred in the small room off the altar. Pastor Ken would again trick me to go there to do some errand for him. Then he would meet me and grab me from behind. The door would be locked. Blah, blah, blah. It's very graphic. So it's pretty rough. Reverend Kenneth Christian Heuermann grew up attending St. John's Lutheran Church in Merrick, New York. He was part of the Luther League as a boy, which he later was involved with in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And this is from his deposition, Kenneth. What's your father's name, Alfred? What's your mother's name, Hilda? And did you have siblings? Yes, I had 5 siblings, all of them deceased. And did any of your siblings go into ministry? No. Where did you go to high school? Wellington Mapham High School in Belmore, Long Island. So he's in Long Island too. Where did you go to college? In Ontario, Canada, immediately from high school? Yes, sir. At the University of Canada in Waterloo. What did you degree? Reverend Heuermann does not give Rex Heuermann's name when listing his cousins. Interesting. Kenneth Heuermann's brother, George Heuermann, was a big shot Nassau County Police Department cop who graduated from the FBI Academy and is seen pictured below with J. Edgar Hoover. So showed that. Nassau County police officer and Rex Heuermann's cousin, George Heuermann, is pictured here with President Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1953. This is like what comes to mind for me is the whole story of Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, where like the families are involved in all the stuff, right? I mean, I'd probably just ruin the story for you, but if you watch that movie or read that book, that's really what it's about, is like abuse and torture and dungeons and all that stuff. And that's why, like, the whole story is that the investigator is supposed to find the woman. The woman finds out and she leaves. And so that's why, that's the whole kind of narrative of that story. And it feels like this is what this feels like too, just going through all this stuff. So there's Heuermann. These are all oversized guys. Like Rex Heuermann's 6'4", 300 pounds. Like he's big. All in the family admiring her father's new deputy inspector's badge after recent promotion ceremony at county police headquarters in Mineola is Kath Heuermann, 13. Watching are the new deputy inspector, George Heuermann Wright, and police commissioner, Francis B. Looney. Heuermann is Looney's administrative assistant. So they mentioned Francis B. Looney and when I talked to John and Lena on Monday. So it's just 2 days later. RW describes a man named Mr. Roberts who wore a police uniform and was part of the child abuse ring. Did you make any efforts to determine Mr. Roberts' first name as an adult? I didn't know his first name. He was called Mr. Roberts, and he was identified him by having, he wore either a police uniform or a security guard. I didn't know him as a member of the church. He was one. Did he abuse you? I can recall one incident of all 4 men sexually assaulting me. The paragraph I was reading from page 4 of your letter, Bishop George described Mr. Roberts, Pastor Ken, and Mr. Rising were the area. I don't know how my body got there. I felt I was being a sacrificial lamb, tortured, and then I would be killed. I was raped on the altar multiple times by them, and then woke up in a small area near the altar with my body partially clothed. RW recounted to her therapist memories of abuse involving a cop, so it just goes on and on. Rex Heuermann's grandfather, William Heuermann, and Kenneth Heuermann's father, Alfred Heuermann, were brothers. One of the belts used to bind LISK victim, we already went through that. This is a picture of it. William H. W.H. The cops hid the images of the belt from the public for 10 years while the Long Island serial killer was free to murder at will. The Suffolk County Police Department also had the information identifying Rex Heuermann over 10 years, but incredulously claims to have forgotten to investigate the witness David Schaller's tip. I don't know who that is. Schaller was the roommate of the last known LISK victim, Amber Costello, and the last to see her alive. And I think that was the one where Schaller saw some big guy in an avalanche, and that's the car that Rex Heuermann drove. On October 24th, 1954, Reverend Kenneth Heuermann was installed as assistant pastor at Parkside Lutheran Church in Buffalo, New York. So that's Heuermann is shown presiding over Easter services on April 10th, 1955. In June 14th, 1959, Reverend Kenneth Heuermann was moved to St. Michael's Lutheran Church in Camillus, New York, where he worked for 30 years. Imagine 30 years of abusing kids. And I think later in one of his depositions, he said that he was a virgin or something, like he was celibate. Camilla, and then he's around Boy Scouts too. Great. Camilla Scouts receive high church honor with the Reverend Kenneth C. Heuermann, pastor of St. Michael's Lutheran Church, second from left, presented Pro Dio et Patria medals to these three Camilla Scouts. At far right is Heinz Nell, Scout Executive of Interlakes District, who presented the candidates for the award. Wow. It's weird too, like Hunter Biden has a connection to all those lakes. The lake areas, Interlakes District. He has that tattoo on his back. Cornerstone laying for Camilla's Church. The Reverend Kenneth C. Heuermann, pastor, is shown above with members of the congregation. And this is the one. Reverend Kenneth Heuermann claims he's a 92-year-old virgin. Have you ever had sex, sir? Nope. That's what he said. Have you ever been engaged? No. Do you keep in touch with any of these previous girlfriends? No. Have you ever had an intimate relationship with any of these girlfriends? No. Have you ever had sex, sir? No. Nope. It is my understanding that Lutheran Church does allow their pastors to be married. Is that right? That's right. As opposed to the Catholic Church. But I ask you whether or not had proposed to anybody. Have you ever proposed marriage to anybody? No. Don't you feel sorry for me? That was his response. Did you have a car consistently while you were working there? Yes. Do you remember why you turned down the marriage proposal by this woman who was a member of St. Michael's? It wasn't the right person. There he is again. RW describes Kenneth Heuermann as a tall man, at least 6'2" and usually outfitted in black clerical garb. Heuermann acknowledges the children of the church were dressed in ritual garments called albs, A-L-B-S. RW describes Kenneth Heuermann and Edgar Rising using purple stoles to bind and torture her in her testimony. RW testifies to Kenneth Heuermann and Edgar Rising taking photographs of themselves torturing and assaulting her as a child. RW asked for help from a church leader named Elizabeth Rising in St. Michael's Lutheran Church. Elizabeth Rising, who RW says saw her being abused, refused to help the child and let the priest and other men rape her. She was the loving wife of Edgar Rising. Betty J. Rising's obituary describes her as a woman of strong faith. This is another. Kenneth Heuermann was part of the Luther League youth group as a boy growing up on Long Island. Let's talk about the organization, the Luther League. Did you participate in the organization called the Luther League as a pastor or a young person or what? Yeah, I guess as a young person. Answer, this is Kenneth. Growing up, yes. Growing up on Long Island, yes, I belong to the Luther League, my home church. Yeah. Tell me what the Luther League is. Kenneth, it's an organization of young people with the idea of they usually would have met, once or maybe twice a week or a month. Shall I say, usually on a Sunday evening. They would meet for devotions and they would have a program of some kind, then some fun things like some ping pong or shuffleboard or whatever else they wanted to do or go on a little trip or whatever. As a pastor, what would your role be in the Luther League? Just to guide them a bit, off the scene. With the president of the Luther League or the officers of the Luther League, meet with them and plan their programs and that kind of thing. So there's all kinds of pictures of this guy. A lot of. But this is where things get stranger, right? So she's claiming, RW's claiming the time of the abuse is 61 to 68, right? And so then Murder Inc. goes into this. On August 13th, 1967, Mary Ann Marzullo and Jacqueline Saunders. And if you remember this whole, like I'm referencing the girl with the dragon tattoo, there was a series of murders, like mysterious, violent murders of women, young girls, in that movie as well, right? That were showed like all around Sweden. And this is that's why this whole situation reminds me of that. On August 13, 1967, Mary Ann Marzullo and Jacqueline Saunders were found murdered in a remote field in Cicero, New York. The two 14-year-old girls were bound together and strangled to death, right? Binding. The rope that bound them together also bound the girls' hands behind their backs. Because the two girls were bound together, some suspected more than one killer was involved. The victims were tortured before their murder and with bruises on their faces and bodies. There's all news articles here. Slain girls believed strangled. That's in Syracuse, right? So this guy was outside of Syracuse. Hold on just a sec. So then you see these articles. Let's see. Murder girls identification. This is how crazy this is. Murder girls identification of the car in which two murder girls were apparently picked up after a fireman's carnival gave police the first break last night in the strangling. The two 14-year-old girls, Jacqueline Saunders and Marianne Marzullo, were found dead with their bodies tied together in an outlying field Saturday. District Attorney Frank Gualtieri said that an eyewitness had positively identified the vehicle in which the girls were seen riding. More than 100 state troopers reportedly were combing the county for a car matching the witness's description. The district attorney declined to describe the car being sought or to state whether police know the car's license number. Gualtieri said that the bodies were discovered by a fisherman on an outing with his two sons. The bruises on their necks indicate that someone used his bare hands to strangle them. So somebody who's strong, probably. The girls were last seen at about 11:30 p.m. Friday at a fireman's carnival in Mattydale. The bodies were fully clothed, and Gualtieri said there's no evidence to indicate they'd been raped. These are the kind of pictures on a lost kind of highway. The two 14-year-old girls were found bound together and strangled near a creek in Cicero. RW describes being kidnapped and taken to a creek in the woods in Warner's Road, where she was raped by Reverend Kenneth Heuermann in Edgar Rising around this time. St. Michael's Lutheran Church is 16 miles from where Marzullo and Saunders were found murdered. You see this on the map, kind of where they are. Witness described a black and or blue 1959 or 1960s sedan near the crime scene. Police searching for sedan parked near murder scene. Let's see, what is it? The vehicle identified was black and blue sedan. In the 1960s, Reverend Kenneth Heuermann drove a two-tone blue Chevy Impala sedan. This is from his fairly recent deposition. Okay, what kind of car did you have back in the 60s? Oh, God, a Chevy. Do you remember what kind of Chevy? Impala. Did you park it at the church? Sure. Was it visible from the parking lot? Depends if I parked on the upper level or the lower level, but there is a parking lot on both levels, so I guess the answer would be yes. How many seats did it have? It was a sedan, 2 or 4 door. 4. Do you remember what color it was? Two-tone blue, I believe. Okay. How about in the 70s? Did you still have that car? Hope not. No, I think I changed to a Ford Galaxy. 1 month later, so this is a different death. 1 month later, on September 25th, 1967, 17-year-old Rose Ann Spina was found raped and strangled in the weeds in its lot in Syracuse. Was her murder connected to the recent Marzullo and Saunders case? So that's her, another body, 17-year-old. Syracuse girl found slain. Reverend Kenneth Heuermann, accused of raping and torturing children, was also on the Board of Education for the West Genesee Central School District. There's his name. In 1991, RW alerted Bishop Edward K. Perry to her abuse by Kenneth Heuermann. Betty Rising sat outside the room during RW's meeting with Bishop Perry. Bishop Reverend Dr. Edward Kirsten Perry apparently did nothing and had worked at Parkside Lutheran in Buffalo in the 1950s like Reverend Heuermann. So he's passed away. That's a picture of him. RW alerted the Evangelical Lutheran Church and its bishop, Edward K. Perry, to child abuse in 1991. Reverend Kenneth Heuermann is seen in a photo parading with children in ritual albs, those ritual clothes, in September 1991, 8 months after RW reported him to the bishop and district attorney. In 1993, a Lutheran reverend named Reverend George Mather founded the New England Institute of Religious Research as a counter-cult ministry that preaches about the dangers of satanic cults, while his fellow Christian priests perpetuate widespread sexual abuse against children. Reverend Mather, a consultant to the G-Men, was involved in investigating the New Bedford highway murders in Massachusetts, long suspected of being connected to the Long Island serial killer murders, right? So it's the same kind of victim profile in the New Bedford highway murders, which is sex workers, right? There were sex workers within like 1 year, I think, 10 sex workers, and then never caught, right? Nobody was, there were suspected perps, but I don't think anybody was ever caught. So this is the guy. Crime in the occult. Could Satanists be in our midst? The Reverend George Mather, author, educator, and expert on Satanism and the occult, consultant to the FBI, LA Police, San Francisco Police. He's coming to, of all places, St. Mark's Evangelical Lutheran Church, just where Kenneth Heuermann worked, right? Oh, no, that's a different one. That's in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, sorry. Cult investigator speaks Saturday at church, George Mather. And these are all kind of things from 1992. Articles about him. Satanism is a threat, so is heavy metal expert on evil says. Reverend Mather of New England wards LV of Halloween rituals. This kind of ties in. Lena also sent me, for people who don't know, like I did a study on it. Actually talked about Ricky Casso, I think, in my book Abomination. But she sent me something because Ricky Casso was a Satanist, was on Long Beach, right? Killed somebody, and then I think he killed himself. Totally satanic crime, but with some interesting ties, which we will go into here in just a minute, which pretty mind-blowing. Well, he basically saw an MK Ultra doctor before he went crazy. He was the guy's name was Abrahamson, so that was from something that Lena Ajit sent me. Let me see if I can find it. News at the time swept the interesting details on the rug in favor of salacious headlines. Casso alleged to be part of a cult in Northport, right? Casso's victim in ritual sacrifice, Gary Lauer's father, was a Belgian spy. Casso used to go to a cult-themed head shop in Northport with Mariah Carey, so there's a connection there. But one of the interesting things is, before the murder of Lauers, this is according to her, Casso attended and was treated at South Oaks Psychiatric Center in Amityville, of all places, which at the time was directed by Harold Abramson, the MK Ultra doctor who also tended to Frank Olson. While attending the South Oak Center, supervised by Abramson, Casso supposedly performed a ritual with a skull that he had officially exhumed at the Amityville Horror House. He was known to be like a grave robber. So that's Casso. That's a whole nother story. I'm almost positive I covered him in detail. And I used to have videos on him on one of my old channels that got taken down by the bums at YouTube. But yeah, this story, Evening Stars on here. She's like, this story is so crazy. It is crazy. It is totally crazy. The upstate New York Synod Evangelical Lutheran Church office headquarters is at St. Michael's Lutheran Church in Camillus, where the Reverend Kenneth C. Heuermann lived and was a priest for decades. And this is Marie George or Jurge, who was, some of these people who complained. Let's see. I grew up across. RW grew up across Lutheran Church in Babylon, New York. RW asked Bishop Mary Urge to help in 2007 about the abuse, but she didn't seem to get any help until the lawsuit, $45 million lawsuit. It seems like it was settled. Bishop Urge had Reverend Heuermann, accused of raping and torturing children in the congregation where Urge worked, promised that he would not. This is with Urge. What action did you take to assure that Pastor Heuermann would not be conducting any additional services so as to protect anyone else from abuse? Answer: I met with him and got a promise from him that he would not. He had already not been doing much at that point anyway. How long had you known Heuermann for? Probably since 1978. Wow. That's incredible. So she knew him, like these depositions were within the last 2 or 3 years. She knew him for 40 years. Incredible. And then probably claimed she didn't know. I don't know. Incredible stuff. Marie Urge found Kenneth Heuermann to be no threat to children. Marie Urge admitted she was trained in how to spot victims of child abuse. She appears to have worked at the office of St. Michael's Lutheran Church and had met with RW and her therapist there when RW was abused. In 2014, John Mackholtz replaced Marie Urge as head bishop of the upstate New York Synod of the ELCA. He's from Islip, New York on Long Island. Yeah, you can't write. There's pictures of this guy. You just can't write this stuff. Here's the York family talking about lasting impact of sex abuse. There's a lot of information here. I'm almost done. But you just see these weird overlap. This is the July 18th, 2019 Reverend Kenneth Heuermann anniversary celebration, Camillus, New York. An invitation. You are cordially invited to celebrate the 65th anniversary of the ordination of Kenneth Heuermann. He was ordained for 65 years at St. Michael's Lutheran Church, the place where the abuse. And there was a second victim that came forward too. Crazy. Just crazy information. More pictures. Reverend Heuermann was one of a never-ending list of priests and pastors accused of abusing children. An article in the Buffalo News on December 23rd, 2019 details a lawsuit accusing Reverend Bruce Connolly of the abuse during his time at First Trinity Lutheran Church in Tonawanda. The details and cover-up by the Lutheran Church read almost exactly like the details in the Heuermann abuse case. There's Bruce Connolly, so that's why they're in these things. They're close to children. Other faiths now named in sex abuse lawsuits, 4 of 7 new cases are outside the Catholic Church. This is from the Child Victims Act. Lawsuits in Western New York are primarily against Catholic Church entities, primarily the Buffalo Diocese. But child molesters operate in a wide range of denominations, religious groups, and other organizations, and lawsuits filed last week in Erie County State Supreme Court bore that out, as 4 of the 7 cases had nothing to do with the Catholic Church. So there's a lot. This case happened in the context of other cases. In November 2019, the pastor of St. Michael's Lutheran Church, Paul Dreher Weiberg, gave this message about the lawsuit against his church for raping and torturing children. Reverend Heuermann, who was accused of raping children in the church, is still listed on the church bulletin this message appeared in as Pastor Emeritus. Wow, somebody did some great research here. That's incredible. There's the thing again. RW describes how a bald boy named Olin Smith, who tried to help her as a child, may remember the abuse. RW wrote Olin Smith but never heard back. Reverend Heuermann gives short and concise answers during his entire deposition until he's asked about RW. Suddenly, Kenneth Heuermann asks if he can tell a little story. Heuermann then claims he just happened to be looking at a photo of RW's confirmation class with, who would you guess but Olin Smith, when Smith pointed to RW in the photo and said, I couldn't think of a thing about her. RW suffers from dissociative identity disorder due to the extreme trauma she experienced when young. Yeah, we're going to go into a court case. In a 2008 post on the now defunct bygoneli.com forum describes a strange encounter in the woods of Manorville near the Long Island serial killer's cluster site. A group of friends off-roading observed a long row of cars parked deep in the woods at the end of a trail. They then stumbled upon a group of men in black clothing in a huddle who appeared to be doing something with rocks that were painted red and numbered. Some rocks appeared to have the number 20 written on them, and the other, the 30. An empty large bucket was near the cars. Crazy, right? They just wanted this new indictment of the two additional victims mentioned, this Manorville, right? Which is kind of in the center of eastern Long Island. I mean, holy smokes. I'll read this whole thing because it's something else. This is from August 2008. Last night, my friends and I were doing some off-roading in Manorville around 1 a.m. when we stumped upon a long row of cars at the end of a trail. Needless to say, this was pretty weird, being that we were having slight trouble getting through the puddles in a lifted Jeep on 33s, so there was really no way in hell a FWD full-wheel drive Kia would be making it through. We thought it was really weird, but I figured there must have been a different trail that we missed that gave much easier access. Anyway, I figured it was a bunch of kids hanging out, but I was mistaken. I decided to go up to the group of people who seemed to have stopped what they were doing and huddled in a group looking at us when we stumbled upon them, and asked them how they got in. I was kind of thrown off to see that it wasn't a bunch of kids, but actually what appeared to be mostly adults, I'd say, from early 40s to possibly 50s, all wearing all black, and some in what seemed to be very nice clothing for a woods. I talked to them briefly about how they got in the trails, and they seemed nice enough. They really didn't give me any insight as to what they were doing, not that they had to or should have, but then we noticed on the ground scattered throughout the area were red painted rocks with numbers on them. I think more than a few had the number 20 on them, and one that I saw had the number 30 painted on it. I'm pretty sure these rocks had something to do with the people there, as I've never seen the rocks before, and the people had a large bucket next to the car, which may have been to hold the rocks. Anyway, I'm not one to pass judgment. I mean, any paranormal investigation team or group of urban explorers can easily look like a bunch of weirdos to somebody else, and I'm not going to jump to conclusions saying it was a cult or Satan worshippers. They seemed like nice people. Just wondering if anybody knows what they may have been doing, if anyone has any idea what red number rocks relates to. I really should have just asked them to point blank. I should have asked them point blank, but I sensed that they really didn't want to tell me. Didn't want to put them on the spot just out of respect, as they were being helpful in telling me about the trails and where to go, etc. Curiosity is getting the best of me now. Weird. RW describes Reverend Kenneth Heuermann using stones with either writing on them or arranged to spell her name as part of a ritual to sexual assault her that took place near a creek on Warner's Road. And they said, we have to stop at the bank. When we got to the light, I leapt out of the car. I was sitting in the back seat. Reverend Heuermann leapt out of the front seat, grabbed me, and pushed me back in. And I begged him to take me home. And, they were halfway to my house. I begged them to take me home, and that wasn't going to happen. And they went left and took me out on Warner's Road into the country area. That's where more abuse occurred. How old were you on this occasion? Roughly, I'd say 13 or 14. Okay, you mentioned a baptismal rite. Can you be more specific what you meant by that? We're going back to the date of the movie at the mall incident. That he took me down to the stream and performed the words from the liturgy and the Sunday hymnal for a baptism and poked and dribbled water down my naked body in the form of a cross. And the stones that you mentioned in the form of a cross, did they have something else written on or carved into it or something else? They were stones that were in a nearby mound that was in the area where Mr. Rising was standing and hanging out. And they had RIP, as in rest in peace, and RW, then a cross, actually across the stones. The stones were arranged to spell that. Yes. Okay. When asked if he ever touched RW, Reverend Kenneth Heuermann's response was never, 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 never. Wow. So that is crazy. So then, I mean, it just gets so crazy. Then I'm going to read from her doctor's statement. I mean, so she got a professional doctor, but who does she get who's the expert in this case? But this guy from Stanford, whose name is Spiegel. I mean, this is so crazy. You cannot write this stuff. So this is exhibit 21 from the case, and they bring in a guy from literally Stanford, forensic psychiatry, professional background. This is from April 2nd, 2022. So for 2 years ago. I'm a board certified psychiatrist licensed to practice medicine in California since 1974. Wilson professor in the School of Medicine and associate chair of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Stanford University School of Medicine, where I've been a member of the academic faculty since 1975. I've directed the Stanford University clinics and the Stanford Psychiatric Outpatient Clinic. I'm elected member of the National Academy of Medicine. I'm a past president of the American College of Psychiatrists and past president of the Society for Clinical and Experimental Hypnosis, 1995-1997. I work with PTSD. He's worked on the DSM. I published 3 books, 50 scientific journal articles. So this his expert stuff is, without question. I'm kind of skipping through it. I can put a link to this too. But I'm a winner of 22 awards, including the 2011 Arthur Sutherland Award from the International Society of Psycho-Oncology for Lifetime Achievement, the 2004 Judd Marmor Award for the American Psychiatric Association for contributions to biopsychosocial research, and the Hilgard Research Award from the International Society of Hypnosis. Like this guy, you got to watch this guy. I'm just getting started. This is incredible. So he examines RW, right? We've talked about this. This is the woman I showed at the very beginning on the video, right? With the bad audio. I conducted 10 interviews of RW via Zoom between February 9th and April 15th, 2021. In this report, I intersperse RW's extensive description of traumatic events she experienced and her symptoms with my evaluations of them. I found her to be open, forthright, and clear in her description of her history of sexual, physical, and emotional abuse by members of her family and a minister, a sexton, a lay member, and other members of her church. She says she was abused by people at the church from age 18 to 17, and she has 40 altars of varying ages. So she's like shattered. Her brain has been shattered. She reports that she has daily dissociative experiences. I feel like crying now. I don't have any reason why. She started sobbing. I call it going away. It appears like I fainted. I always sit on a couch. It happens 2 or 3 times every appointment. I dissociate more in the day. I can hear him talking to me. I can always hear when I dissociate. So this is like satanic ritual abuse, but also causing dissociation, right? If I'm with somebody I know, I do get back, but sometimes I freeze up. At worst, it's 4 hours long. If I'm home alone and nobody is there to give me Xanax, sometimes I can bring myself back. Sometimes, this is our RW, I feel like I'm fighting it. It takes more energy to try to keep centered. The girls worry that they're going to go to prison because they did something bad. When they see the word forensic, that's what they think. They're listening. I hear voices. Suzanne, Sarah, Serena, Samantha, Sylvia. They're here today listening. Some are amalgamated now. There were 40 at one time that were frequent, a rotating group of 40 of them. Now the goal was to integrate. The girls would braid in 3 together. There were braids, as a young girl, a lot. There are 3 male names, Talus, Tybalt, and Tobias. They come in 3s. So she has all these. I mean, this is actually kind of a long document. It goes on, but he lists Dr. David Spiegel, Mr. Hypnosis himself, all these little alters, right? 40 alters with different personalities. And then he observes her dissociative episode, March 3rd, 2021. I'm having a hard time. I'm fighting altering. Marisa, I pretend I'm feeling normal and I'm not. You're the man in the rectangle, the child's interpretation of Zoom. I'm 12. Kind of goes on. It's pretty disturbing. Talks about emotional pain, family abuse. I guess there was alcoholism and sexual abuse in her family. Then the church abuse. She estimated she suffered 25 to 50 abuse events at St. Michael's Church. The church, the volume of abuse was horrendous. The first I remember was the church memories as of 2 weeks ago. I see it, feel it, taste it, smell it. Very vivid. Details very splintered, right? That splintered is like a real symbol of this kind of dissociation. When I was 15 or 16, I was sexually assaulted on a baptismal font, marble basin with water, solid brick and stone around it. Brought up into the sanctuary, undressed from the waist down. The other end of the church, sit nude while ministering. Other men forced sex on me. It's pretty awful. I think at the end, really bad. I rolled up in cloth and thrown in the trunk. On the Richter scale, this is the worst one. They got out a sheet. I wouldn't even believe it. Mr. Rising opened the trunk, got out a sheet, tied up my wrists and legs with this scratchy twine, wrapped me in the trunk of his car. Cars were big. I was 5'11". Put me in the trunk, closed it. Seemed like wherever. Left me there to die. Threw me out onto the tarvy. Untied me. Doing this. This what will happen. Your body will never be seen again. BITCH. I don't know what it meant. Threw away my clothes. I tried to run away. I was too weak. Let's see. There's just all kinds of nasty stuff. Another witness. She told me that another witness victim had come forward, Susan, and he has her full name, Susan C., who now lives in Colorado. She is the same age as RW and reported being trapped in the choir loft and was twice forced into sexual activity. She played the piano and after these events fled the church. Inducing guilt in WR. Pastor Ken forced oral sex, threatened me if I didn't do it, forced me to hold the matches over me, forced me. RIPRW in this mound of earth. They told me that my corpse would rot here. I'd be dead and gone, would sleep forever. I got no protection from her family. She has amnesia. She developed awareness of her dissociation. She has PTSD flashbacks. She received psychotherapeutic treatment by a Dr. Matloff. She's been in psychotherapy for 33 years. I mean, it's just incredible. But I mean, this guy's conclusion is a lot of medications. Terrible personal life, doesn't get along with people. And then this guy gets out the DSM-5 and diagnoses her with dissociative identity disorder. There's a lot of these stories in here. I mean, this is a whole nother show. I could do that. Post-traumatic stress disorder. But if you're watching this, I mean, this is a 20-page document. Like somebody went in very detailed. And the doctor writes, I find her allegations against Heuermann entirely plausible, and I believe them. The defense is attempting to claim to the extent she has symptoms related to childhood sexual abuse, they are all due to the uncontested abuse she suffered at the hands of her alcoholic grandfathers, her father and brother. So, talks about dissociative disorders. Can a person suffering from DID be truthful about abuse? Yes, people with DID are not psychotic. RW's psychological solidity, despite her dissociative identity disorder, is underscored by her nearly 40 years of consistent employment as a special education teacher. Let's see. Dr. Matloff's RW for some 2,000 sessions over 32 years. So she had a doctor over the time. And then he signed everything. I hold you above opinions on reasonable degree of medical certainty. Her jaw was broken, so like crazy stuff. But he basically like validates all this stuff. Like, yeah, she's probably telling the truth. So anyway, that's the whole case. It's just an incredible case. So that was the case against Kenneth, the civil case against Kenneth Heuermann, with all this other information from an NKO, like a guy who's the head of the hypnosis. I got to show you one more thing. Like, you won't even believe this. So this guy Spiegel, this isn't his only gig. He has a bunch of other stuff. But one of the more incredible things this guy has is, this is actually real. This is not fake. I'm not making this up. This is a website you can go to right now. This is called Reveri, Reveri, and you can try free, guys. You can go free try the immediate benefits of self-hypnosis. The Reveri app is pioneered and co-founded by leading Stanford psychiatrist Dr. David Spiegel. Have fun with that. Improve your focus, sleep better, growth mindset. God only knows what kind of mindset you'll get after that. But can you believe that? Like, that's how advanced. So people like you see these arguments online about MK Ultra. Guys, we're way past that. Way past that. So go back, if you get a chance, go back and listen to the interview I did with John Ray and Lena, Ajit, Ajit. And this is kind of a follow-on. So there's something really strange going on with that family. And I think this shows that there's a lot more to the story, and a lot of weird things going on Long Island, and a lot of strange characters. This Plaka guy, Burke, Heuermann, and certainly Kenneth Heuermann. Like, whoa. Gets really dark. Thank you for listening. And if you could share this material too, I'd really appreciate it. I don't have an ad budget or anything. I'm just an independent journalist. So sharing my work is much appreciated. And it's something that I really kind of need to call out for more, just to get my show heard more, because more listeners for me would allow me to do a lot more stuff. So that's kind of what I'm looking for at this point. I have so many episodes a lot of people haven't listened to or heard. So anything you can do to help share the show, I really appreciate it. I also have a Patreon. I post a lot of stuff on Patreon. I'll post some of this information on Patreon. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. Appreciate it.